And welcome back. This is part 2 of the update after the hailstorm. And we were looking at the tomatoes when I last left off, and also my roses, irises, and sunflowers, and cocozelle squash, and the onions. So the onions are kind of struggling, and I think it was because the tops had gotten really damaged with the hail. And as you can see, the tops are now crooked and misshapen, so I'm not really sure if we're going to get onions this year after I planted 275 onions. So I'm pretty bummed about that, but it could have been a lot worse because a lot of the garden was destroyed with the hailstorm, and they were not destroyed, but I don't think we're going to get very good sized onions on these. And I did cut back a lot of the limbs on the trees and things, particularly this one, to get some more sunlight in here. And there is more sunlight. In about an hour there will be a whole lot of sunlight come in here, so they're getting plenty of sun, they're getting all the nutrients that they need, but they're just suffering from when the hailstorm happened. So I don't know if we're going to get any onions or not this year, and it makes it really sad. So I guess I'll be checking out farmers markets and things like that to get a good bushel of onions or so to make it through the winter. And then our roses, they have just been flourishing. I had trimmed them back severely, if you remember, this past fall in one of my videos, because they were just getting so out of control and kind of shading out everything else. So I had went ahead and cut them back, and now they are just coming out by leaps and bounds. This one over here to the left is a white rose, and I'm not even sure of the varieties because these were here when we moved here. And then the one in the middle is a red rose. And then the small one, short one over here, I believe is a long stem rose because it grows completely different from the other two. And this one is a peach rose, like a really dark peach. And it's a beautiful, honestly, it's my favorite one. But it always stays very small like this. And the stems on it, it doesn't have a whole lot of roses. It'll have one or maybe three at the most, and they are on very long stems. So I think this is a long stem variety. So then we have the iris, which is already finished out its blooming. I had 6 stalks that were full bloom this year, but sometimes I have upwards of 20-30 stalks of blooms in these, but this year I only had 6, and I think that's because I had really came in heavy with weeding and hoeing this area and keeping it clean of weeds, and I think that they suffered a little damage at the roots. So I will go ahead and probably mulch these at the end of this season. Once I go ahead and cut the tops back, I always cut the tops back. It actually makes sure irises come out better the next following year. Last year I had probably 30 stalks of blooms on this one, and this year I only had 6. So that tells me that there was some damage, and the hailstorm did damage quite a few of the leaves. You can see some holes back in there. So I just think it kind of suffered because it was right at the time when it was getting ready to put its stalks up and bloom. And the blooms never last more than a few days, so they've already bloomed and gone since the hailstorm. And there is the rhubarb that I had planted in here, and I actually took out all the Virginia creeper along this fence line here up to that point. And I did that so we could get some more sunlight in here because I had stuck a tomato in here that I had extra. And it is flourishing over in this little bitty strip of dirt that I have. And I had went ahead and put in a rhubarb here next to the iris because they companion plant really well. And it was a good idea because there was one leaf, I think, that was left remaining on this rhubarb, and then it got beat off with the hailstorm, and now it has came back out with 2 more leaves, really great big stalks, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more leaves come out. So maybe we'll have something this year, I don't know. But there is some of our lettuce that we had to replant. That is a mesclun mix. And my daughter has some sage planted in there, which is coming up, I see. And she planted some more cress, which I see there is up. And we planted some summer savory, but we've not had any luck with the summer savory, so I think it might not be a year for that. And I do have a couple of more tomatoes over here. These are the replacement sun sugar tomatoes. So I hope to get those planted, and hopefully they'll take off and actually have something to harvest this year, because I really looked forward to trying those, and they got killed out with the hailstorm. So hoping to try those. I had to replant all of my peas, and all of my peas are back up. And I had planted some extra peppers that I had, because a lot of our peppers got killed with the hailstorm. And so I've got those over here, but I now have a couple of spots that I could put something else, because they seemed to struggle for a bit because they were very, very, very small. They were just leftovers that I had, and they're finally kind of coming out of it, but there was only 4 of them left. So I've got a couple extra spaces that I could stick something in over here, and I think I'm going to just stick some more squash, because we love squash so much. And this is the pole beans that I had to replant. They originally were a bush variety of Blue Lake, and I didn't have any more of those seeds, and I couldn't find any more, so I had to go ahead and just get Blue Lake pole. So there's about 7 plants left of the original bush, and the rest of them are pole beans, so we'll have to trellis this very shortly. And we have yellow straight neck squash here that you can see that are coming up. So I have a long line of those that I'll have to thin out, because I kind of just threw as many seeds as I could in there to get things up and growing, and then I'll need to thin them out. And I'd had a couple of extra dark green zucchini that had came up just randomly out of some old seeds that I had in the seed cups. So I went ahead and got those planted out here this morning. And then there is our original pepper plants. We had originally had, I think, about 10 in here, and all we had left were 4. So we had to end up going and picking up some more pepper plants because I ran out. And I decided to go with some Marconi peppers, and so I got those, and then I also got a purple bell and an orange bell. So we have those in there. They're doing great. And then we have the cabbages in the back. Originally I had 6 or 7 cabbages, I think, and now all we have left is 4 because the hailstorm got the rest of them. And then there's a couple of broccoli there in the back. And then these are the cauliflower, and they were really, really damaged, almost killed completely. And as you can see, this morning I had came in and started trimming off all of the dead leaves. I waited a while to see if I would get some new leaves on them before I started trimming off the old ones, and I did. And so they're starting to really pull out of the damage that they had received. And I still have the original 12 cauliflower. So I'm shocked. Usually if you have damage on cauliflower like that, it won't come back out. And I'm still waiting to see if the heads will be misshapen because of the damage that they received. But anyway, the 4 remaining cabbage in the back, I trimmed those off this morning as well. And they actually have quite a few leaves and even some curling in the center, which is telling me they're going to make heads. So they're looking beautiful. I'm happy with that. We've got 4, at least it's not completely gone. And we have our onions in the back. Those are the spring onions that we're going to seed, and they're still going to seed. They kind of took a hit in the hailstorm as well, and had limped a little bit and laid over because they had just been shoved over by the ice. We had 3 to 4 inches of standing ice after that hailstorm, and 4 inches of rain that happened in less than a 3-hour period. So it was just kind of crazy, and all the water was standing about a foot deep in this garden when it happens. And I had to replant all of my lettuce, which you can see the lettuce growing back there between the cauliflower, and the collards were completely demolished, and I had to replant those. And then I went ahead and I had leeks in this row originally that has some sunflowers in the front. And the leeks were completely destroyed. So I went ahead and planted a variety of white acorn squash in here. as well as the cocazelle squash. So I have both of those in here, and they're coming up right now. Some of them are up, some are just now coming up, but we should have enough of a season for those, because I noticed the white acorn squash has a shorter season even than the table queen squash, acorn squash. So looking at about 50 days to harvest on those, which is really, really good. And look forward to seeing what the white acorn squash look like. And then, of course, I had to replant my lettuce. This is the mescula mix again, and 2 varieties of it. So I had to replant that, and you can see the one on the left is doing a little bit better than the one on the right, because the right one I planted a couple of days later. The parsley is doing great. It weathered the hailstorm just fine, because it's been through all kinds of things in the past and survived it all. And then we have more of the spring onions in the back there. And then I had to replant all of my spinach, and the spinach is just now coming up. And we still have some cool temperatures here. We did have some days in the 90s, but next few days is supposed to be in the 70s and lower 80s, even the 60s at, I think, Friday. So we're going to be having some cooler temperatures. The spinach is going to love that and flourish, and so will the lettuce. And then I had to replant all of the rutabaga. If you remember, the big, beautiful plants of rutabaga that I had to replace them all. So those are coming up now, and I'm going to have to thin those out again. And those are the broccoli. They withstood the hailstorm. They were a little damaged, but not huge like the others, the cauliflower and things. But the ones in the front that are getting the most sun, of course, are doing better than the ones that are in the back, that you can see right here. But the ones in the back will most likely still do something. If not, it's not a huge loss, because I just had so much damage at this point. I'm just like, well, whatever. The carrots have struggled because they got a lot of damage, and they had just started coming up when the hailstorm happened. So a lot of them got killed out. I had to replace them again, and I still have some of the original ones that I had planted this season. But then I had to plant more. So those are just now coming up. And I did go ahead and take the opportunity to make the rutabaga bed a little bit smaller, and planted some lettuce in the back. This is iceberg lettuce, so I'm going to have lettuce heads, cabbage, and some beets. So I've got beets there in the back. I'm not a lover of beets, but my partner loves beets, so went ahead and grew those. And then I've got some beets tucked away in between each of the broccoli here. And I did go ahead and trim off some of the damaged leaves this morning on the broccoli, because they had so many leaves anyway. They're doing great. My lemon tree actually, surprisingly, survived the hailstorm without any damage, but I did go ahead and remove some of the leaves that have been getting some sunburn and things out here, and which is fine. And I'm actually thinking about going ahead and cutting off this extra branch here, not cutting it off completely, but just shortening it so it kind of bushes out more along the base. And I did get it repotted into a larger pot, and I just went ahead and added one of my extra cucumbers into the side there. And I've actually got some blackberry seeds that are planted in there to see if those come up. I just wanted to use it as a method to get the blackberries started, because I just didn't want to put them in seed cups again. So I want to see if the seeds actually do anything, so we'll find out. And then a couple of the roses that had received a lot of damage. These are the mini roses, and I had a peach, and then here was a purple. The purple is starting to come back out now, and the peach wasn't damaged so heavily by the hailstorm, so it's still blooming. And then this sunflower that I had come up volunteer in this planter, I went ahead and just left it in there, and then I planted some marjoram at the base, and the marjoram is all up and flourishing. But this sunflower had received a huge amount of damage, especially on the lower leaves, and I had to cut off all of the lower leaves, but the top is coming out just fine. So we'll see how that one does. It was a volunteer. I'm not even sure the variety. And then the fuchsia kind of didn't get any damage with the hailstorm, so it is beginning to bloom like crazy. It had shot up new blooms, doing wonderfully. Got some more lettuce planted here, and all of my flowers here are doing great. and the dill. So I've got a whole lot of things planted. As you can see, they're all doing really well. I had to replace all of my radishes. I've got mustard, kale, and 2 types of kohlrabi in here in this section, which was the new bed. They're all doing great. Gonna have to thin them out a little bit. And then this was the jack-o'-lantern patch, which I've also added some zucchini in here because the jack-o'-lanterns will bloom before the zucchinis even think about blooming, so there shouldn't be any cross-pollination there. And they're doing great. This was the one original one that was left remaining after the hailstorm, which is a lot bigger, and I had trimmed off some of the damaged leaves with it. And then we have the lemon balm and lemon mint in this pot is flourishing. They were barely up, I think, the last time we did a video. And I planted some more lavender, which is starting to come out now. And then all of this section got cleaned up, and this is underneath a tree, so there's not a whole lot you can put here, but I did put some iceberg lettuce. And we've got some butternut squash along this area that gets a little bit of sun, which is just now starting to come up. So, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. That is the tour for this evening, and hope to see everybody in the next one.